So David Hogg has been endorsed to be vice chair of the DNC by Tim Walz. This goes to show that the Democratic Party, at least some of the leadership, hasn't learned anything from their defeat in 2024. So Jake Uger correctly pointed out, he's both correct and incorrect in his analysis. He pointed out that the Democratic Party doesn't want to talk about socialism. They don't want to promote socialism, and this is correct because their donors, don't want to push for that, which is actually partly correct. He also talks about how wokeness is a losing issue because most people have common sense. Most people work for a living and have to actually solve problems and need to have a degree of logic and reasoning in their life. And nihilism is just is like declaring war on reason itself. And that's where you get the wokeness and the diversity hires. You see what's going on in California right now with those fire departments. Most people do not support wokeism. They do not support the nihilism because it's anti-common sense for people. Those that do support it are a relatively small minority that happen to be very vocal, and they also happen to be educated or indoctrinated by these nihilistic professors that adopt the nihilistic philosophy. So Cenk Uygur is correct to say that this is not a winning strategy. It's not popular. That is correct. He is wrong, however, in assuming that socialism would work or that there would be a significant portion, well, there are a significant portion of people who actually think socialism is a good idea, despite the fact that it never works. However, it won't work in the long run. It never works. So this in the long term is also a major losing strategy for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party needs to completely re-examine its ideological profile. I think that it needs to adopt a more libertarian stance. It needs to promote free markets, and it needs to be socially on the left, for not because they're nihilists, not because they're socialists, but because, like I always say, it needs to adopt rationality. This, however, the endorsement of David Hogg shows that they have not embraced reason at all. And if this continues, assuming all else equals, assuming that there's not a massive economic depression under Trump's watch, and you watch, that's something that's being planned right now. Assuming that Trump's presidency goes well, then I can pretty much assume that J.D. Vance is going to be the next president after that. And the Republicans will keep the Senate and take the House if we don't allow those seats to be stolen, which I suspect that they were this time in California. But that all aside, socialism, nihilism certainly doesn't work. The wokeism doesn't work, and we're seeing that in real time. And socialism doesn't work either. It never works, and that's because whenever you have government involvement in something, governments don't have the same price discovery mechanism that private enterprise or private individuals do. That is a detail that economist Ludwig von Mises pointed that out. He predicted the Soviet Union would collapse decades before it did. And the other part of that is, and let's integrate that fact with a moral implication, and this is an Ayn Rand argument, and that is that force diminishes a human from becoming human. In other words, it actually diminishes the humanity from man. Humans, or man, in the way she says, man requires freedom in order to function properly. And that goes to the price discovery mechanism. Man interacts with other men properly in a free market environment. And the price discovery mechanism is a corollary of that. So when you get government that steps in, government is a monopoly of force. It distorts relationships. Okay, and that's why the Soviet Union collapsed. That's why China's having massive economic problems, because China is a very much a mixed economy that has a lot of authoritarianism. They direct their companies to uh, focus on full employment instead of just letting them be profitable. You see what's happening right now in Venezuela. You saw, I'm sure you saw the satellite photos between North and South Korea at night, where South Korea is lit up and North Korea is dark. Economies that have that level of force distort relationships. They make economic productivity much more difficult or even impossible. And that's why we can't have socialism here in the United States either. The same thing would happen here. Our economic development would be retarded. People would be a lot less happy. You would see a lot more alcoholism, et cetera, et cetera. Socialism, in a sense, is also an expression of nihilism. So we need to reject the German idealism, because that's where it's coming from. That's Immanuel Kant with the nihilism, and that's Karl Marx with the socialism. We need to reject that entire philosophic branch wholesale here in the United States and embrace a philosopher by the name of Aristotle, which is dubbed as the father of logic and the father of science. So we can get a culture of individual freedom, of logic and reasoning and science, and we can do a lot more with our resources, and we can promote freedom that way by being the shining example on the hill, so to speak.